All right. I want to welcome Vince Burruano to our podcast today. Vince, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Vince is the owner of Vince Burruano Consulting Services and the author of A Daily Dose of Sales Wisdom, which is an awesome opportunity to chat about his experience, which he has a ton of experience in the moving and storage industry, as well as many other realms. So, Vince, again, thank you for being here today.
Appreciate it.
I wanted to start off with a theory I have that sales has changed and the approach to sales has changed in the last 15 years or so. And I would argue maybe not for the better in terms of how salespeople approach sales. How do you feel about that? Do you agree with that? And if so, how do you think sales and the approach to sales has changed over that time period?
That's a great question, and it's been an ongoing debate since I first got into sales, a little over 30 years ago. And as I've chatted with people about the subject, about the changing environment, and the profession of sales, one thing that hasn't changed much are the people, both from the sales perspective as well as the prospects and clients. I always like to say people are perfectly imperfect. And what you need to understand about sales is if you're going to be successful, you need to have the mindset of wanting to be helpful. I think there's too much loss in the fact of techniques and strategies, which can all be helpful. But if at the base you're not looking to help somebody, you're just not going to be very successful because you're not going to come across as someone who's genuine and trustworthy and elevating yourself to kind of a trusted advisor role. It's very important that you always look to be helpful and to improve someone's situation. And it's okay if they're going to buy from you, if that will improve their situation. But we need to start with that as the foundation to be helpful.
And let's expound on that a little bit. So in a relationship where I'm trying to sell my services to this person over here, when you say be helpful, um, to your point, other than, hey, let me explain to you why my services would add value to what you're trying to accomplish, what other areas can you be helpful in? What does that mean?
Well, I think that being helpful is that more than the sales professional, people want to deal with business professionals. And I make the distinction because if you're a business professional, you have to be schooled in your own art of selling, but you also have to understand the industry that you're operating in. You have to understand how businesses function. And rather than just focus on being a good problem solver, you need to become an expert at problem identification. Far too many people want to jump in and solve the first problem they see. Look, there it is. Get it. Well, take a step back and think about it. Oftentimes, the first problem you see isn't really a problem, it's simply a symptom of an underlying issue. And better sales professionals, in my opinion, are not only good at listening, but they're very good at understanding and asking questions in such a way to help the individual they're working with go through their own process of self-discovery, kind of having that aha moment where you go, oh, I've been worried about this, but the real problem is further down and we've hit bedrock. That's what we have to tackle. If we've tackled that, we'll solve so many other things and we'll improve our situation so many other ways. You'll be able to create value, not just slightly more, but multiples more than what anybody would ever spend engaging you. And for that, you'll you'll get referrals and you'll get introductions very easily because people will see that you have worth beyond what it is that you're selling.
Yeah. And I think that maybe gets to a little bit of what I was thinking when I said that sales has changed over the last certainly 15 years, probably longer. The concept of the consultative sort of relationship based sale, at least back in the day, put you in a position to be able to have those conversations about how else you could be helpful, about adding value maybe beyond again selling your actual product. And maybe this is a silly example, but I know salespeople really good at what they did, but older at this point, but who, would call they had the relationship with their prospects and their clients where they would call them outside of the time frame when they would want to sell a product and say, "Hey, I'm just checking. Last time we talked, you said that your mom wasn't doing well. Is she doing better now? She is. Great. Excellent. All right. Well, good. I just want to check in on you. You know, we'll talk to you soon, or let me know if you need anything," kind of thing. And I don't know that happens anymore. And when you don't have some of that relationship, you don't put yourself in the same position to be able to have the "what else can I help you with" kinds of conversations. Do you think that's accurate, or is that even a good idea nowadays?
Well, I think it speaks to how people see you. When I was in my early 20s, which seems like 100 years ago, I had a client call me and ask me about what he thought were the best type of monitors to buy for his office. Now, I was at the time selling engineering equipment, that you plug into your network, but had nothing to do with monitors or computers. And I didn't understand why he called me until my my manager, who was a heck of a lot wiser than I was, said he just paid you the greatest compliment. He knows that you don't sell monitors, but he's looking for your expertise. You're out there, you see what other people have, and he trusts you enough for your opinion. He goes, that's really what you're shooting for. That's what you're trying to get with people, is that they look at you and go, that's a business person. And if I have an issue, even not something that they sell, but that can help me. I've had situations since then, and I've taken it as a great honor. I had a client recently who wanted me to speak to his son who was in college, give him some advice about careers. When people invite you into their world beyond what it is that you do, it's a very high compliment. And I don't say that to brag. I say that to help people understand that if you're creating value for people, they're going to want to work with you in many other ways and spread the word. And in today's environment, everybody has access to information. When I was first in sales, you knew more about your product or service than your prospects. They just didn't have a way to get it except through a brochure or talking through a sales professional. Now, you can go on the internet and find anything and probably know more about it if you spend the time than anybody who's actually selling or marketing the product. And so, where there used to be this advantage of information and imbalance, I have information you don't, I have a better situation, that's all leveled out. You better be coming in there with some unique insights and some expertise beyond that simple information to demonstrate that you're worthy of somebody's time.
That's a really interesting point and a good segue into another question I had for you, which I think has to do with this. I was going to call it a myth. We'll see if you agree or not, but sort of this myth that we as salespeople now, or as businesses, have to respond to consumers 100% in this sort of Amazon like way where everything is sort of instant gratification. Like they need it right away. They want to click a button and be done with it, that kind of thing. And when you talk about the fact that information is ever present, that sort of puts them a step in that direction. They already have the basic information. And so maybe that's what we're talking about, is they've already sort of sold themselves part of the way. And so now we need you as a salesperson to make up that last fraction and get them across the line. But I guess when I say myth, my argument would be, going back to what you said earlier, people are still people and haven't changed that much. Um, I feel like we're getting sucked into that a little bit too much. Particularly, for example, in the moving and storage business. At the end of the day, the product that we're selling is very manual. We're still packing things, we're loading things, we're driving things. And so it's really just the front end of that process, perhaps, that can be sort of Amazoned, if you will. What do you think about that?
I think that you raise a great point. And I think that even with something that's a commodity like moving, um, can be a commodity if you don't do anything to be different. And I don't mean that you say that you're different, because that's not being different. You have to figure out what's of value and put your effort there in a way that creates a difference between you and somebody else. And there's a lot of authors who've talked about this, is that if there's three companies and there's no perceived difference in the quality or value they're offering, then it only makes sense to choose on price. But if one of the companies stands out and is different in everything they do, and it doesn't have to be a million things, but just in their interaction and how they approach things, um, you may find yourself wanting to do business with them because they demonstrate that they understand you, they get you, they understand your problem, they did a better job of sharing how they're going to approach solving that problem, and the comfort level. The only time where people truly buy on price is when they don't see a difference. If there's a big enough difference, people will pay a premium. And, we see that in everything. Otherwise, there'd only be one kind of ice cream in the freezer section, but there aren't, right? And there'd only be one type of car if everything was exactly the same. So, what I would encourage people to do is to think about ways that they can be different in a way that adds value. For example, um, I think far too many sales professionals show up unprepared for a first meeting with a client. I would encourage them to do a little bit of preliminary work with the client over the phone to kind of set the stage for what that first meeting is going to be like, and to show up prepared. I'll give you an example, if it's okay, in the moving and storage business.
Please, yeah.
I had a client some time ago. They were doing a relocation. They were looking to liquidate quite a bit of their furniture, but they had not yet to identify a partner. So, having that appointment 2 or 3 days into the future, I called our partner and had him attend the meeting with me. And I showed up with the liquidator, and I introduced them and said, this is our partner, and they can help you understand what value your furniture may or may not have. Even if the person wasn't available by phone, now with smartphones, you can take some pictures and email it, or do a video like FaceTime or something like that. That's different. Now you're solving problems for the client. They didn't ask you to bring the partner. They just mentioned it as an aside, yet you took that opportunity to say, listen, I can help you. And
Mhm.
if you can help them with that, them wanting to work with you on the move becomes a bit of a no-brainer, does it not?
Yeah, for sure. No, I think you're setting yourself up to be again that trusted advisor, and take that role, which obviously is invaluable.
Absolutely.
You know, how about from a salesperson's perspective when you are talking to your clients about what, if you're advising them on how to improve their sales performance, what are those things that, what is that hard work that needs to be done that maybe is not being done, maybe in terms of networking and research and so on? Where do you see the deficiencies?
Most of the time, it comes down to lack of process. Um, and I'm a huge proponent in creating a checklist. I think that many sales professionals engage prospects or even customers that they've done work with in the past without a kind of a standard operating procedure of how that engagement's going to go. For at the very top, you've got to go through this discovery to make sure that you qualify that you're working or potentially working with the right people. Newsflash: not everybody, even if they're moving, is a prospect for someone in the moving business. Just like as somebody who's looking to buy a car isn't a prospect for a company that sells cars. Um, you have to realize that not everybody's a fit. So you don't want to waste your time with people who aren't a fit, because it depletes the time that you have available to spend with people who are your target audience. Anybody who doesn't see the value in what you're trying to create isn't going to be a good fit. By that I mean, if you're working with someone and you want to come out and look at the project to make sure you do a good job and you evaluate the options and understand the logistics, and they're like, no, 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 I'm just looking for a quote over the phone, just email me. I don't know. Don't waste your time. If that's not a good fit for your business, learn to say no and get a reputation for being a little bit more particular. I was working in the industry at one point, and I was out with a sales professional, and we tended to be at the very high end of the scale when it came to the investment to hire us. We were at the top. And we were at working with a law firm, and they made a little bit of a joke about, we hear that you're the most expensive. And I said, oh yes. And I said, could you do me a favor when we submit our recommendation to you? If we're not the most expensive, could you let us know? Because we probably made an error. And they laughed. They weren't worried as much as the price as they were about the value, and they could see through other interactions that we were creating value. Um, I think one of the great things that we do as a disservice is to refer to documents that we provide clients as proposals or estimates. Why not call them a recommendation? Aren't we professionals? Aren't we experts in what we do? We should refer to it as a recommendation. I always give this free advice away for any industry. Because when was the last time you visited a doctor or a lawyer who could give you an estimate about your condition? I don't, I want a little bit more precision or expertise with that, right? So it's a simple thing, but it makes all the difference in the world if you talk to your prospect and say, I'd like to come back and share with you the recommendation I have for your project, and demonstrate to you that I heard you and understood what you're looking to accomplish, and I can lay out a roadmap for how we'll get there together.
Yeah, and I think I think something else you're pointing to is the idea you used the word precision earlier, and I think that's a good one. Language itself is so important in everything we do, and I think we forget that sometimes. With what we call salespeople, I don't know if this would be a term you'd agree with, but salesperson versus consultant, move coordinator. I think you may have mentioned this in an article you wrote, move coordinator versus some other term, move manager or something, more indicative of what they're actually doing with the customer.
Yes.
Yeah. And do you find that separates that companies, whether it's in our business or not, but that people who pay attention to that stuff really have an advantage?
Yes, I don't ever like to see somebody refer themselves as a sales rep. You're a sales professional. Now you can get into different types of titles thereafter, but even somebody like, if we're sticking to that industry, like a coordinator, well, why not refer to them as a client success manager?
Mhm.
That's really their goal, is to help the client succeed, correct?
Right.
So why not change the language? I always laugh with movers. They say, "Well, we'll send a truck and a couple of guys." I mean, it sounds like it's parole time at the local prison. Why don't we send a professional driver and some moving specialists out to help you? Again, to your point about language, it's such a small difference, but doesn't it sound so much better? I'll give you an example about a client. Um, and I think one of the companies that does such a great job is like a Chick-fil-A.
Mhm.
And when you ask them for something, they don't respond by saying, "Oh, no problem." They say, "It would be my pleasure." And it's such a small difference. But it was something when I was at another company, we were really trying to instill in our crew at all levels, that these little differences. And we had a client who had signed the crew out and then had gone down the hall and decided she wanted to move a chair. And she was grabbing at the chair to move it. And one of our moving specialists um, saw her and ran down the hall to pick it up. And she said, "Well, I already signed you out." He goes, "No, you're my client, and this is we'll take it. We'll take care of this for you." She told me at a lunch thereafter that at that moment we became her preferred mover. She said,
Mm.
when you have somebody on your team, and this is a very junior level person, it's not a supervisor, project manager, just moving specialist, has that ingrained in their mind that there's a way to treat the customer, and that he went out of his way to go down there to make sure she didn't have to lug that chair around. She said it made a huge impression, and for years thereafter, she did work with us.
And it sounds like the other sort of cascading effect of changing the language. It's fine if an executive is making these decisions, say, okay, we're going to start saying this, that, or the other thing, but it really, the important thing ultimately is at the end of that cascade, how does that person to whom we're now referring as something different, how do they feel about themselves? And how does that affect the approach to their job?
Yes.
It,
Yes.
it's not they're not just words, right? They're how do they make you feel?
No, so there's an old phrase, it can't just be window dressing. Okay. You can't just see it from the outside and it looks pretty. You have to be able to go inside and see that it's true. And that's really the difference about being different is when there's multiple touch points and the prospect or client sees it throughout your organization that every time there's an interaction, there's a concern about having it be a pleasant experience for the client. Not just that it got done, because there's getting things done and there's getting things done and having it be a pleasant experience. When I first went into sales, again, a long time ago, there was an older gentleman who told me, he said, what do people want when they buy a, you know, when they go out and buy a drill? And I go, I don't know. I guess they want a drill. He goes, no. He goes, they want holes. He goes, now, today, people don't just want to buy a drill because they want holes. They want to feel like they're a master carpenter doing it. There's a whole experience that goes around this interface. And if you're able to help them realize that experience, then the money doesn't mean as much. I'm not saying you can be crazy more expensive, but you can certainly be at the top of the realm and be a premium if you can deliver on that experience over and over again, because there's too many times where people are disappointed and
Yeah,
they're willing to spend a little bit more to know that things are going to go the way they expect and not just that they were sold. People hate to be sold, but they love to buy. So
right.
let them buy and pay a premium for a premium service, a premium experience.
So let's focus that in on the moving and storage industry, which again you're very familiar with. Um, it's I've always felt a little unique in our business in that in many respects I think our customers, and I'm being a little flip about this, but
Sure.
our customers really want a sort of like a non-experience, right? They want an experience where good means that there haven't been issues along the way, like somebody being late or something getting broken or having an unpleasant interaction with a worker, on a job, whatever the case might be. Um, and again, I'm being a little flip about that. But from your perspective, what do you think our customer base is looking for? And then therefore, how would we adjust our approach to make that experience happen?
It's a good question. The challenge is that I don't think it's just one way. And so if I give you advice, please don't take it as blanket advice for every situation. I have seen clients who do a lot of moves on the evenings or on the weekend. And one of the things that the person wants, since they're going to be there, is a good interaction, some camaraderie with with the move team that you sent. Um, I can remember we had a client, and she would always request the same group of move specialists and project manager because they had a habit, which she loved, of referring to her as Princess. So, Princess, where does this go? And you would think that this is condescending, but she had made a joke herself about being the princess. They picked up on it and she loved it. And she wanted the same people out because it made it more enjoyable at 10 o'clock on a Friday night when she had to be working, that she was working with people who were almost like friends.
Mhm.
And for some people, that means a lot. You have other people who are focused on just being efficient. They want you in and out. They don't want to spend time with you. They want to spend time with their family, which I can appreciate. So then all the things about showing up ready to go early, prepared, um, with the right staffing levels, the right equipment, and getting things done ahead of schedule, that's what makes all the difference to them. So I would encourage you to find for each person how they would define a great experience and then work towards that and having enough flexibility in your system that you could create that experience for them on a personalized level And that's really where you begin to lock people in, where I had seen this before. You'd call up and they go, I really want to do this move on Thursday. Is my usual team available? I'm so sorry, they've been scheduled. And they go, well, what about Wednesday or Friday? They immediately move their schedule around because they're willing to wait, to get that experience. There's something to be said for that. It's invaluable.
No, it's actually, I mean, it could be a great question whether you're in commercial sales, whether you're in residential sales in our industry. It could be a great question. I mean, we'll have to work on the wording a little bit maybe, but hey, so as we're going through this process, tell me what kind of experience are you looking for? And just ask the question in some ways.
Yeah, one of the things that I work to coach people on is to understand what is important, but then how is it important? So, for example, if let's say on a residential move, you go in and somebody talks to you about a grandfather clock in their home. Okay, that's really important. I don't want it damaged, so you make a note of it. But ask them, how is that important? Well, that was that's been in my family for 4 generations. Wow, that's really interesting. When you go back and you make your presentation about the recommendation, you might spend some time explaining exactly how you're going to care for that item, making a note that it's a 4th generation, and the couple wants to make sure it gets handed down to their children. That little bit of difference, a little bit of detail shows that not only did you hear them, but you understood the meaning to them. And I think that conveys at a much higher level, in my humble opinion.
Yeah. Vince, let me throw out this last question to wrap up. And I think what you just talked about kind of gets to this, but I think one of the other changes that maybe I was alluding to earlier over a long time frame of how sales has evolved or devolved or however you want to look at it is the salesperson's perception of how they should be involved after the sale has been made. And kind of what I think you're alluding to is that you really, I mean, efficiencies aside for a minute, but you really need to be some part of that process, even after in our case, the move starts to take place. Maybe that's checking in with the client, along the way, but not divorcing yourself, saying, okay, my part's done, and now our move management team is gonna take over. It seems like that's not the way you would recommend it.
No, I don't think it only applies, although I think it does apply to the moving industry. I think it applies to nearly everything else. Listen, today, despite all the information, all the databases, trying to get the right person on the phone is still very difficult. You making a cold call for me to call on you and not know you, to talk to you about your needs, God, that takes a lot of time and energy. So wouldn't it be great if you made sure that every time you work with someone, their experience was so great that they'd be willing to introduce you to 2 or 3 or 4 other people over time who may have a similar need. I used to laugh. I grew up in an area where people would joke and say, I know a guy. So they were always top of mind, right? Hey, I need to get my roof fixed. Well, I know a guy. And they would tell you, you got to call my guy, Jimmy. Call Jimmy. He'll take care of you. When somebody tells you that, you don't call 3 other people and get 3 quotes and bid. You call Jimmy and he fixes your roof and you're done. You want to be that top of mind person when someone thinks about it, whatever it is your industry is. You want someone to blurt out, I know a guy or I know a gal, and you want to be that person. On the same side, you want to earn the right, having done such a good job, that I could say to you, um, hey, I understand that nobody may immediately come to mind, but do you think you know of any other business owners or business executives or facility managers that I could speak to, where I could tell them about the great experience you have and see if I could be of service to them? And I think you'd be hard pressed not to get at least a couple of introductions and think about the exponential nature of growing your business the easy way rather than the hard way.
Yeah, and the key there is you got to ask. It can't be.
You have to ask, but you have to earn the right to ask.
Yeah.
So don't be there to make the sale disappear and then come back. To your point, check in, show that you're involved, kind of cradle to grave, and then you'll earn the right. And people will feel, I don't want to say an obligation, but they'll feel a sense of duty to want to help you. People love to help people who have done something nice for them. And if you've done a really good job and they've had a good experience, they're going to want to help you. They're going to say, God, let me think about this. Even better, if you're connected with them on something like LinkedIn, you can go through and maybe see who they're connected to and ask for specific introductions. Say, hey, could you introduce me to some people at this company or that company? Been trying to get in there and speak to them. You can do some of the legwork to make that whole conversation easier.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Vince, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking to you, and I think in a very short period of time, you've doled out some pretty significant advice, and so I know we'll certainly be paying attention to it here at Olympia. So,
Great.
thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
again so much for the opportunity. Wishing you a great day. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks so much.